Whispers of the Ancients, Episode 6, The Nazca, Mysteries in the Desert approximately 100 BCE to 800 CE, Segment 1, Desert Silence. In the vast, sun-scorched plains of southern Peru, where rainfall is scarce and winds whisper across endless dunes, an ancient mystery lies etched into the earth for centuries. The Nazca Desert has kept its secrets buried under sand and time, but high above in the open sky, the truth reveals itself. Hundreds of massive figures spanning miles crafted not by modern machines, but by a forgotten people long ago. Giant hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders and spirals, perfectly straight lines that stretch beyond the horizon. How and why? The Nazca left no written language, but they left behind something far more mysterious, messages carved into the land messages. We are only beginning to understand. Segment 2, The Roots of Nazca. The Nazca culture flourished between 100 BCE and 800 CE, thriving in one of the driest regions on Earth. They descended from the earlier Paracas people, inheriting their artistry and knowledge of textiles and burial customs. The Nazca lived in river valleys fed by seasonal flooding and relied heavily on agriculture. They cultivated maize, beans, squash, guava, and especially cotton, which they used not just for food and trade but for their famously vibrant textiles. Their cities weren't grand metropolises like Teotihuacan or Tikal. Instead, they lived in small villages near fertile land, with ceremonial centers that anchored their spiritual world. The most prominent of these was Cahuachi, a sprawling complex of adobe pyramids, temples and plazas. Cahuachi wasn't a city in the conventional sense. It was a sacred pilgrimage site, a desert cathedral, a place for ritual, offering, and communion with the unseen. Segment 3, Masters of Color and Clay. Though the Nazca left no codices or glyphs, their art speaks volumes. Their pottery is among the finest in ancient Peru, characterized by bold lines, vivid colors, and surreal, dreamlike imagery. They painted deities with feline fangs, serpentine tongues, and radiating energy. Warriors, shamans, harvest scenes, and mythical creatures adorn their vessels, each carrying symbolic meaning. Nazca's ceramics were more than containers. They were spiritual tools used in burials, offerings, and rituals. Even more striking are their textiles woven from cotton and alpaca wool, dyed in deep reds, golden yellows, ocean blues, and earthy browns. These textiles, like the pottery, often depicted supernatural beings, spirits of the land, sky, and underworld. The Nazca saw the world as interconnected, the visible and the invisible, the human and the divine. Their art was not just decoration, it was cosmology. Segment 4, Engineering life in a dry world. In the desert, survival demands innovation. The Nazca mastered the art of water management in an environment nearly devoid of rain. They built Puquio's ingenious underground aqueduct systems that tapped into subterranean water sources. These spiral-shaped tunnels allowed for access to fresh water, flowing year-round, even during droughts. Some of these Puquios are still functioning today, 2,000 years later, a testament to their brilliance. The Nazca didn't just adapt to the desert, they engineered it, bent it to their needs. With quiet genius, they used terraces for farming, channeled rivers for irrigation, and carefully aligned their fields with the cycles of the sun and stars. For the Nazca, water was sacred. It wasn't just a resource, it was a living force to be honored, appeased, and celebrated. Segment 5, The Enigma of the Nazca Lines. But nothing captures the imagination quite like the Nazca Lines, discovered in the 20th century. These massive geoglyphs stretch across hundreds of square miles of desert plain. From the ground, they are nearly invisible, but from the air, they explode into view. Spiders, hummingbirds, whales, trees, even what appears to be a humanoid figure with large eyes known as the astronaut. There are over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 biomorphic figures. Some lines run perfectly straight for over 10 miles. The largest figures stretch over 1,000 feet, the length of several football fields. How did the Nazca create these without aerial assistance? Using simple tools, wooden stakes, ropes, and careful planning, they removed the top layer of red pebbles to expose the lighter soil beneath. With no rain or wind to erase them, the lines have remained intact for centuries. But the real mystery remains. Why? Segment 6. A canvas for the gods. The purpose of the Nazca Lines has puzzled researchers for decades. Some believe they were astronomical calendars mapping the paths of celestial bodies like the sun, moon, and stars. Others suggest they marked water sources, acting as sacred pathways leading to underground aquifers. A few argue they were ritual, walkways traced by priests during ceremonies to invoke rain or fertility. Then there are the bold, unconventional theories. In the mid-20th century, author Erich von Däniken speculated they were runways for alien visitors, an idea that captured popular imagination but lacks scientific backing. Most scholars agree, however, that the lines were deeply spiritual, an offering to the gods above. In the desert silence under the blazing sun, the Nazca may have believed that only beings in the sky, deities or ancestral spirits, could truly see their sacred art. Imagine a priest or shaman standing on a platform, tracing the first strokes of a hummingbird with a rope and stake, believing each line was a prayer stretching toward the heavens. Segment 7. Rituals of blood and transformation. The Nazca, like many ancient cultures of the Americas, viewed the cosmos as a living system that demanded balance. To ensure fertility, rain, and prosperity, they offered sacrifices. Archaeological evidence shows ritual beheading skulls transformed into trophy heads, adorned with cords and painted faces. These were not acts of cruelty, but of cosmic necessity. Blood and life force were believed to nourish the earth and please the gods. Shamans, often painted and wearing elaborate headdresses, used hallucinogenic plants such as San Pedro cactus to enter trance states. Through these altered states, they claimed to communicate with spirits, control the weather, or foresee the future. The Nazca Desert, with its stark silence and endless horizons, was itself a ceremonial ground. Every ritual, every offering, was a conversation with forces beyond human understanding. Segment 8. Kawachi, the sacred center. At the heart of Nazca spirituality was Kawachi. Covering over 600 hectares, it was not a city of daily life, but a ritual complex where the desert met the divine. Its mud brick pyramids, ceremonial plazas, and countless mounds once hosted massive gatherings. Pilgrims would travel for miles, bringing offerings, textiles, pottery, food to honor deities of fertility, water, and the sun. Excavations have revealed remains of ceremonial feasts, sacred figurines, and intricate burial offerings. Some tombs held high-status individuals wrapped in embroidered textiles, their faces painted, surrounded by food for the afterlife. Kawachi was more than architecture. It was the spiritual heart of the Nazca, a place where earth, sky, and the unseen converged. Segment 9. Life, nature, and the harsh desert. To live in the Nazca region meant living with extremes, burning heat by day, freezing winds by night, and water that arrived only through the mercy of seasonal floods. Yet, the Nazca thrived through careful agricultural cycles and deep observation of natural patterns. They saw gods in the mountains, rivers, and clouds. They believed that every plant and animal carried spiritual meaning. The hummingbird, a recurring symbol in the lines and art, represented joy, vitality, and a connection between flowers. And the sun, the spider symbolized fertility and weaving the web of life. The monkey with its spiral tail might have been a representation of cosmic cycles. For the Nazca, every element of nature was alive with power, demanding respect and ritual. Segment 10. The decline of the Nazca. By 800 CE, the Nazca culture began to wane. A combination of factors likely contributed to their decline. Environmental shifts, including devastating floods caused by El Niño events, which destroyed crops and irrigation systems. Deforestation, as they cleared too many trees for agriculture, leading to soil erosion. Overextension of resources, as growing populations strained the fragile desert ecosystem. As their society weakened, ceremonial centers like Kawachi were abandoned. The desert lines remained, but the voices that created them faded into silence. The Nazca culture would eventually merge with or give way to the rising Wari Empire, which spread through much of the Andes by the 9th century. Yet, the Nazca spirit lingered in their art. their technology, and a giant canvas of lines still visible today. Segment 11. Rediscovery from the skies. For centuries, the Nazca Lines lay hidden in plain sight, too vast to be seen from the ground, too remote to be widely known. It wasn't until the 1920s, with the advent of commercial aviation over southern Peru, that the mystery was revealed. Pilots flying between Lima and Arequipa noticed strange shapes, carved into the desert floor, geometric figures, spirals, and giant animals that stretched hundreds of meters across the plain. Suddenly, the desert was no longer empty. It was a gallery of ancient messages, waiting to be deciphered. These aerial sightings sparked international curiosity. Archaeologists, geographers, and theorists poured into the region, trying to make sense of who made these lines, how, and most importantly, why. Segment 12. Maria Reich, Guardian of the Lines. Among those drawn to the mystery was Maria Reich, a German-born mathematician and archaeologist. Arriving in Peru in the 1930s, Reich dedicated her entire life to the Nazca Lines. She measured, mapped, and preserved hundreds of figures by hand using just a measuring tape, a compass, and a ladder. Reich believed the lines were a giant astronomical calendar, aligning with solstices, equinoxes, and the positions of key stars. According to her, the Nazca were sky watchers, engineers of cosmic harmony. For decades, she lived in the desert, working tirelessly to protect the lines from damage. Encroaching roads and modern development, she gave lectures, led tours, and campaigned for international recognition of the site. Thanks to her efforts, the Nazca Lines were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994. Today, she is remembered as the Lady of the Lines, a symbol of passion, perseverance, and respect for the ancient world. Segment 13. Theories and debates. Over the years, many interpretations of the Nazca Lines have emerged, each offering a different window into their possible meaning. Some scholars, like Anthony Aveni, have proposed that the lines were ritual pathways, used during religious processions or rain-invoking ceremonies. Others, like Johann Reinhardt, suggest they were offerings to mountain deities known as apis to ensure water flowed from the highlands into the valleys below. A growing number of researchers believe the lines were multifunctional, blending astronomy, water worship, and religious ritual in one sacred system. Meanwhile, some have ventured beyond the academic sphere. Theories about ancient astronauts, prehistoric landing strips, and extraterrestrial messages have captivated public imagination but remain unsupported by evidence. Still, the lack of definitive answers adds to the allure. The lines continue to challenge our understanding of how and why ancient humans created monuments beyond the limits of their visible world. Segment 14. Modern preservation and threats in the 21st century. Preserving the Nazca Lines remains a delicate task. Despite international awareness, the region faces numerous threats. Illegal mining and agriculture, which cut into the desert's crust, infrastructure projects, such as roads and pipelines that risk damaging geoglyphs. Climate change, which may bring heavier rains and erosion to the normally dry plain, and even acts of vandalism or negligence, like the 2018 incident when a truck driver drove across the lines, causing visible scars. Preservationists now use satellite imagery, drones, and 3D scanning technology to monitor the lines and assess damage. Digital mapping allows researchers to study the figures without stepping onto the fragile surface. Efforts by Peru's Ministry of Culture, along with international organizations, aim to balance tourism and protection, ensuring that the magic of the Nazca remains intact for future generations. Segment 15. The enduring enigma. More than 2 millennia after their creation, the Nazca Lines continue to stir our imagination. They remind us that ancient people were not primitive, they were builders of meaning, capable of shaping vast, enduring visions without modern tools or machines. These lines are not merely drawings on the earth. They are a message across time, a testament to human creativity, belief, and our eternal dialogue with the cosmos. Even now, new geoglyphs are being discovered. In 2019, researchers identified dozens of previously unknown figures using artificial intelligence and satellite imagery, suggesting we They only scratched the surface of what the desert holds. The Nazca did not leave behind written texts, but through their lines, their temples, and their sacred desert, they continue to whisper through the ages, "We were here. We watched the skies. We walked the earth in reverence, and in their silence we find mystery. And in their mystery we find awe." Segment 16, Parallels. Across the sands, the Nazca Lines are not alone in the story of the ancient world. Across the globe, deserts have whispered similar mysteries. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans aligned their buildings with the solstices. In the Sahara, the Tassili Nazca rock art speaks of forgotten societies whose messages endure in stone. In Egypt, vast geoglyphs and pyramids served as both tomb and testament where earth, sky, and soul converged. It seems that where the earth is silent, ancient peoples sought to speak most loudly. The desert, with its absence of noise and permanence of surface, became the perfect canvas for monumental storytelling. The Nazca were not copying others, they were part of a broader human impulse to etch belief into the earth, to summon the sacred with scale, and to make the invisible seen. Segment 17, Continuity into the Andes. Though the Nazca culture faded around 800 CE, its legacy endured. They were part of a lineage of Andean civilizations that shaped South America for millennia. From the early Paracas people, who influenced their art and burial practices, to the Wari Empire, which adopted and expanded upon Nazca irrigation and iconography, and ultimately to the Inca, who carried forward the reverence for mountains, sky, and sacred geography. Ideas don't vanish with the fall of a city. They flow, transform, and re-emerge. The Andean worldview, where earth, water, and cosmos form a unified whole, can be traced back, in part, to the desert paths carved by the Nazca. Even today, Quechua-speaking communities in Peru honor the Pachamama, Mother Earth, and the Apis sacred mountains with rituals reminiscent of their ancestors. The threads remain. The stories, while scattered, are still being told, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in wind. Segment 18, Lessons from the Dust. What can the Nazca teach us? First, that creativity and complexity are not bound by technology. With no wheels, no beasts of burden, and no metal tools, the Nazca crafted a landscape-scale masterpiece still visible from the sky. Second, they remind us that spiritual purpose often drives innovation. The aqueducts, the textiles, the lines themselves, these were not made just for function, but for meaning. Third, they offer a lesson in fragility. A single misstep by nature or man can erase centuries of expression. What took generations to create can vanish in an instant. And finally, they challenge us to look deeper. Not all answers lie on the surface. Sometimes, you must rise above to see the full picture, to understand what lies beneath. Segment 19, The Sacred Silence. There is something uniquely humbling about the Nazca Lines. They do not shout. They do not demand. They wait patiently, quietly beneath the desert sun. Their meaning may never be fully known, but perhaps that is part of their purpose. Not all mysteries need solving. Some exist to make us pause, wonder, and connect to something greater. In a world saturated with noise and distraction, the Nazca remind us to be still, to listen, to feel the vastness of time and the weight of intention etched into the earth. They did not write books. They did not build empires of conquest, but they left us lines to follow, to question, to honor. And in doing so, they became more than a culture. They became a mystery. Segment 20, Echoes in Modern Time. Centuries have passed since the Nazca walked the sunburnt plains of southern Peru, yet their presence lingers. Every year, researchers, tourists, and spiritual seekers journey to these desolate valleys. Some come to measure and map, others come to feel. Modern Peruvians still live in the shadow of Nazca's heritage. Local artisans weave spiral motifs into textiles. Farming communities still depend on the ancient puquillos, which remarkably continue to function more than 1,000 years after they were built. This is not just history. This is living memory. The lines etched in the sand may seem fragile, but they are not forgotten. They survive not just in the dust, but in the hearts of those who call the land home. Segment 21, The Value of the Unknown. It is tempting to solve the Nazca mystery, to fit every hummingbird and trapezoid into a tidy explanation. But perhaps the greatest lesson of the Nazca lies in what we do not know. These geoglyphs were not meant to be puzzles. They were acts of devotion. They connected people to gods, to water, to ancestors. To draw them was an act of faith, a message to the sky with no promise of reply. In a world obsessed with certainty, the Nazca offer a different wisdom, that it is okay to wonder, that some truths are meant to be felt, not solved. The desert holds its silence not as a secret, but as a sacred space. Segment 22, A Legacy Beyond Time. From the skies, the Nazca Lines still speak. They speak of a people who believed in the unity of nature and spirit, who drew not just for themselves, but for the gods they could not see, who engineered a life in one of the harshest environments on earth and flourished. Their world was not primitive, it was precise, purposeful, profound. Their art was not decoration, it was communication between humans, cosmos, and the divine. In every swirling spiral and every endless line, we are reminded that even the most ancient hands reached upward, not to escape Earth, but to embrace it. Segment 23. The great story continues as we leave the Nazca valleys behind. We move forward in time-bound northward into new lands and mysteries. In the next chapter of Whispers of the Ancients, we'll uncover the story of the Moquia people of warriors and artists who lived along Peru's northern coast, where the Nazca whispered with lines, the Moqui shouted with color, sculpture, and sacrifice. Their tombs hold secrets, their murals hold messages, their legacy, like the Nazca, challenges our ideas of civilization, power, and meaning. The journey continues. The desert falls silent once more, but its whispers remain, etched in earth, carried by wind, waiting for those who choose to listen.